Welcome to today's Hero Healer Luncheon series. We are blessed today to have with us a graduate of our first year at ASDO, DezBaa Damon. And DezBaa is kind of legendary around here. There's many stories that float around, and some of them are truer than others, I understand. But we're so glad to have her here. The idea is that we want to place in front of you individuals whose life that you can emulate. That you could look and say, hey, I could do that. I could be like that person. And hopefully it's something that's refreshing for you as you're working so hard, studying, to have somebody come and remind you of why it is you're working so hard and studying in the first place. So let me tell one or two stories about DezBaa before we ask her to speak. One of the things we do is we do a road trip for the ASDO students to community health centers in the state each year during spring break. For those who are interested in taking some of their spring break time and going and seeing our partners in the health center world, we run a bus and we go down. And the first time we did that, DezBaa was on the bus. And it was actually a van that year. We rented a van, and we drove down to El Rio, amongst other places. We got to El Rio, unannounced. We didn't tell them we were coming. Walked into the dental clinic there, and it was closed. And they said, we're closed today because, lost my mic. We're closed today because we're having a groundbreaking on a new dental clinic. And so we got back in the van, and we drove down to the groundbreaking in South Tucson, and it was a little bit pitiful. There were tents set up, shades, and food out, and 3 different news cameras there, and about a dozen people. And they were feeling bad. They'd organized this event, and they had about a dozen people and news cameras, and so it was great excitement as 15 or so students get out of the van. And so great excitement as 15 or so students are getting out of the van, and one of the televisions comes up to us and says, hey, is there a chance that one of you can speak to the people of Tucson? And everybody looked immediately to DezBaa, as she was the vice president of the class, and said, yeah, she'll speak. And so proud of DezBaa. She's a first-year dental student, and was given about 5 minutes before she's to speak to the people of Tucson in front of 3 different news cameras. And sure enough, she stood up and said, this is why we've started the Arizona School of Dentistry and Oral Health, our commitment to the underserved and our partnership with community health centers. She was spot on in everything she said. And one of the legendary stories about DezBaa. Another one, which some of you have heard, is told often by Dr. Cottom, and it has to do with DezBaa on one of her rotations. And she was on a reservation, and had treated an elderly lady on the reservation, and was someone with immense respect in this culture and this community. And went through the day and went off to lunch, came back from lunch, and saw that this lady was sitting in the waiting room, and thought, oh my, what sort of mistakes have I made? I hope I've not embarrassed my school somehow in working with this elderly, respected lady from the community. And she went on into her exam room, had some exams to do on some other patients, but was thinking as she was doing that, boy, I hope I didn't mess up with this very respected leader in the community, who she knew had driven a long way to come there in the first place, and obviously had driven a long way to come back again. And so when it came time, she invited in the lady, and the lady brought in a young girl with her. And she said, excuse me for coming back, but I just wanted my daughter to know that it's possible for a Navajo girl to become a healer. And so DezBaa was already being the sort of hero that this whole hero series is about. One more point before I ask DezBaa to talk, and that is about 3 weeks ago, we had a celebration for George Bluespruce, the nation's first ever American Indian dentist. And in that celebration, we named this series the George Bluespruce Hero Healer Lecture Series. And the idea is that George has made it his life's passion to be a hero for young Indian children, to say to them, you too could be a healer like I am. So what a fitting opportunity, what a fitting event that we have DezBaa here, who was one of the mentees of George,
to be the first speaker on this campus after we gave out the award to George for the George Blue Spruce Hero to Hero series. Let's welcome DezBaa Damon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. After hearing those stories, I'm like, wow, who's that? But, really, I always enjoy coming back. My heart is here with the school. And just because of the way that the whole mission was to be for public health, to help the underserved, that was always my mission when I was going through undergrad. And so when I found out this school was opening, actually one of my best friends, she told me about it. She's like, you gotta learn about this school. They're opening. They're really focused on community service, things like that, things that we've already been doing in undergrad. So I came to the school, and sure enough, it was right up my alley. And thankfully, the stars aligned, and I was accepted into the class. Things are very different now when I come here. And there was a time when we have a simulation lab for dental school, and that was on the second floor of this building. But now everything's moved over to across the street. And actually, this room that we're in now, we actually had our white coat ceremony in this room. And there was no carpet. It was just concrete floor. And they're still putting up some of the wall, the ceiling and stuff like that. So that's how much change has happened since 2003. And that seeing how much change has happened shows how much commitment the people that are here are doing to make this school progress. So in a way, what I'm going to try and do too is also validate your guys' decision on coming to this school, because you made a good decision. So like they said, I was part of the first class. I graduated in 2007. And I see some of my past instructors here, which is really great. Currently, I'm the dental director at Community Dental Services in Albuquerque. And that Community Dental Services is basically a nonprofit clinic. We have 3 of them. So I have fun driving around Albuquerque. Every now and then, once a day of a week, I try to work at each clinic so I can make sure I know what's going on at these clinics. And if you have any questions as I go, don't be afraid to just raise your hand, and we can talk about the question if you have it. When I was in dental school, I really wanted to take the opportunity to put myself out in the communities where I know there was underserved. I wanted to take advantage of my situation of being able to travel and just really get in there, get my hands dirty, to say. And I noticed that Alaska kept coming up. They kept saying there's a huge need in Alaska. We need people in the rural areas. Now, how many people want to go to a rural area? Not very many people do. And especially with our professional programs, sometimes with the money, the finances, it's hard to make that kind of decision because you're also burdened with, okay, now I have to pay back these loans. But the great thing about sometimes taking these opportunities is that there's also a chance for financial payback. So, please look into that, because these rural communities really do need our services. And all of you are coming from a great school. So you need to bring those skills to these rural communities so the people can benefit from it. So that's kind of my mindset, and I knew I wanted to go to Alaska. So we happened to have 2 externships during our 4th year that were available in Alaska. One was Barrow, and one was in Bethel. So the first one I went to was Barrow, and the second one I went to was Bethel. And then after I graduated from dental school, I decided I wanted to take a career in Bethel. So here are some pictures from Bethel. I worked there from 2007 to 2011. And I started off as a staff dentist. And you'll notice, once you leave here, you'll have leadership skills. You'll have ways of knowing maybe how things should work in a clinic. And so don't be afraid to bring those up when you start your job. But what happens, though, is you have to be careful, because then they start moving you to management, things like that. So if you're okay with that, please do it, because, like I said, we have the skills that we've learned here. And in that case, that did happen. I moved to deputy director, but I gained so much experience and knowledge in that position that has really helped me in my position now as dental director. And in Alaska, when you go to a rural area, you also have really great exposure to different experiences and procedures. So being a dentist, there's a picture here with a plane here. We used to get into these little planes, and you never really notice how much equipment and instruments, materials, stuff like that, you don't realize how much you use in dentistry until you have to pack it into a huge steel box. And we had 2 of them, and plus we had to carry a portable compressor, and then we also had to carry our dental unit. So, imagine you have huge silver boxes, the compressor, which, sometimes you have to have 2 people to carry that, and then you have the dental unit. Now you're getting into one of these small planes with you, the pilot, and then your assistant, and then also your bags. You're like, whoa, please, I hope this plane takes off. But, luckily nothing has ever happened. The scariest thing that ever happened to me was we were flying out to a village, and we had to make a turnaround, but you could see this fog of clouds, just, all white cloud, just like a wall of it. And we had to go through there to turn. So we went right into the clouds, and sure enough, just like white out. And then we come back around, and the pilot was going to try and land. So we went through, and that was a little bit, I could feel myself getting a little bit nervous. We came back around, and then we started to land, but the timing of coming out of the clouds and seeing where the landing strip was, he had to kind of bring it down quite a bit, the plane. And it was kind of a little bit of a close call, but I think it's kind of one of those moments, we as professionals might say, oh, thank goodness we got through that. But, you never show it to the patient. You don't want the patient to know that. And I think the same thing happened with this pilot. He's like, oh, yeah, I knew what I was doing. But I'm like, yeah, right. I don't know if you knew what I think we kind of all crossed our fingers on that one. But, but those kind of things, they can happen, but really, the risk is not really that high. But the people, once you get to the village, they really, really appreciate you being there. And you're working like 5 to 10 days, like all the way from 8 in the morning to like almost 10 o'clock at night, just seeing patients. One of the other unique experiences I had was at one of the villages, we actually worked with, I can't remember with what branch of the military, they came out, and we actually partnered with them, and we did a village trip with them. So the cool part about that was I got to ride in a Black Hawk, and that doesn't normally happen, but now I can say I've ridden in a Black Hawk. And one of the other things about Bethel is in the winter, you can see here there's the Kuskokwim 300 start-finish line. So you have these sled dog races that go on. And this Kuskokwim 300, which we call K300, is actually a qualifying run for them to do the Iditarod. So where they are right now is on the river, and it's a lot of fun. Of course, it's very cold, and but it's really fun to watch, and it's amazing. I think your perspective on things are like what you expect. It changes because you look at these dogs, and I would imagine a huge, Alaskan Husky. There's got to be like 8 or 10 of them. But they just look like these little tiny dogs, but they're so ready to go. They're like jumping up, like let's go, and they take off. And once they come back, they're just, you can tell they kind of lost that energy when they come back. But I don't know of any of the dentists that have ever tried to participate in this because it does take a lot of training. But we had some friends that did it, and it was a lot of fun to watch. And then I just took a picture of this tooth. You get to, like I said, you get to have these unique experiences. You get to see stuff, see procedures, do things that maybe not normally you would do because you're in a rural area. You're the only one there. Of course, using good judgment. You don't want to put the patient in harm's way, but sometimes you have to do something. And this was one of those teeth where I just thought, wow, this is really unique anatomy, and so I decided to take a picture of it. So just kind of being a dental nerd. Let me go ahead and go to the next slide. This was my experience when I went out to Barrow, and I just happened to get there beginning of October, and I think that's when they had just opened whaling season. And so I remember I got up in the morning and went to the clinic, just barely started working, and already one of the assistants had said, "Oh, they just caught a whale, they just caught a whale." And I thought, how did they even know that? There's like, who told you this? How do they get the information from the ocean to here? So it was really funny to hear that, they found out so quickly that they had got a whale. So afterwards, the director of that clinic, she said, well, is it something you're interested in as far as like going there afterwards, after work, to see this whale? And I said, yeah, let's go. And so she said, okay. So we drove out, and this is what we saw. And you can imagine whales, very huge. And so the whole village was involved, like the whole community of Barrow. And they were just like stockpiling these piles of whale meat all around. And each one was like for a family. And that's how they divide it. So they would be like, this pile here is going to be for this family, this one for that family. And then they also had someone barbecuing and cooking. And then they told me later, because when we drove back to the community where all the houses were, there was a flag that was up at one of the houses. And they said, that's the captain's house. So if you go there in celebration of getting this whale, they're going to give you a little cup of, some of the whale meat. And as you eat it, I guess, the parts that they give you, you eat it raw. So, I mean, I'm not used to that kind of food, so I didn't want to be rude. And I knew I couldn't finish it because I'm not used to that. So I'm like, oh, no, it's okay. I'm just happy to hear that they got a whale. And, so. But, if you do go somewhere and someone offers you something, try and eat it, even if unless, of course, you have an allergy. Because I did have seal soup before, and I've had other things, and some of it might be hard to eat, but the people there, they really appreciate if you just try it. And if it's not your cup of tea, then that's fine. But really, they just want you to try it. They want you to learn more about their culture. So wherever you go, just kind of keep that in mind. This is an example of what we would do when we go to a clinic. We would set up our dental unit, and then we would have to basically turn one of their, well, let me back up a little bit. Every village has a clinic, but they don't have like a PA there all the time, or they don't have a physician or anybody like that. They'll have these health coordinators. And what they do is someone will come in, and let's say they're sick. Like, I kind of came down with something. So let's say it was really bad, and I went there. They would have like this cookbook, and they just open it up to like, okay, cold. And they have a questionnaire. Do you have this kind of symptom? Do you have that symptom? And then they fill out this form, and then they fax it to the hospital in Bethel. And then a doctor will look over it, and then they'll prescribe like maybe cough syrup or things like that. And that's how these clinics work. So they do have exam rooms. So when we would go to the village, we would use these exam rooms, and we would change it over and make it into a dental clinic. And sometimes if they didn't have room in these clinics, we would go to the school, and then we would also set up there. One of the things too, when you travel, like I was mentioning about culture, really that's an important part. If you really want to make a difference, if you really want to get involved, have a good time where you're at as a provider, it's very important to learn about the people there, learn about the culture, because the people are going to respond to you. They're going to know you're sincere. They're not going to, it's easier to go up to somebody that is trying to be open and trying to learn about who you are, rather than someone who is like, oh, I don't think, I don't do that, or I don't want to, I just want to stay here, So wherever you go, just try and be open and ask questions, and, just try and get involved. And, even with that too, though, some cultures, if you're asking too many questions, it might be a little bit too much. But I think all of us are good judgment on how to deal with people, because that's for a career, that's what we're going to have to do. So, but one of the things is the cultural comparisons. Being Navajo, I really wanted to find out more too about the Athabascan people, because what I was told was that we're actually closely related. That there's a story of, like, you know, maybe people from Mongolia came over to Alaska, and eventually from Alaska they traveled down to where we are now. And so when I went up there, you know, I figured, you know, this is a good opportunity for me to kind of look into that more. And so one of the villages I went out to, Shagluk, they had this structure here, which was the health community, like a health, not health, I'm sorry, a community center. And so the way that it's shaped is like the way that our hogans are shaped. And I showed another one here that's actually a hogan where I had a lot of different rites of passage at that hogan there. So, but anyway, you can see the similarities between the two. And the other thing is the language. I don't know my language fluently, but I know enough, I know a lot of words. And so, like for instance, bear, you know, we say shush. And then I was asking the person who's Athabascan, the health coordinator, how do you say bear in Athabascan? And she says, same thing, we say shush. So it was really neat to kind of see those similarities. And then after Alaska, you know, after 4 years or so, I went ahead and I moved back to the Navajo reservation. That was always something that I really wanted to do, was to eventually go back to my community, my own community. And it was a lot of fun. I really liked it a lot. You know, it is in a very rural area again, but you know, Bethel to Ganado, it was like, Ganado was like, oh, I could drive and get out of here, go to Gallup, go to Window Rock, go somewhere. Whereas in Bethel, you can't. You only drive in a circle, that's it. So, you know, being able to go somewhere and go to a restaurant, it was amazing. And so one thing that I had to get used to was not packing so much. So like in Alaska, since you can't really go anywhere, and then prices of food, milk, things like that were very high. So if you happened to go through Anchorage, you had to do some grocery shopping. And it wasn't an unfamiliar thing to get those totes, and then you just stockpile all these groceries, and you get really good at it. You lift it up, you're like, that's about 50 pounds. And then you go to the next one, same thing. Because anything over 50, you would have to pay, or you have to take something out. So that 50 pounds was basically the limit. So at least here in Ganado, I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to, you know, weigh my stuff and say I can only have 2 or 3 totes of 50 pounds of food or whatever. Here I could just throw it all in my vehicle and pack it as much as I want, which I actually did, which was a lot of fun. So I was here. One of the great things about being back in my own community, which some of you, if you're ever thinking about going back, some of us might say, no, I don't think I want to go back. I want to do something totally different. But eventually, you know, it would be nice if there's an opportunity if you go back to your own community. It's a totally different feeling. It's different experience, because you're not going back as, you know, a kid or anything like that. You're going back as a health professional. And so you see the community very differently. Here, you know, I had so many patients that were so happy to see me. I don't think there was really one that said, oh, I don't want to see you. In fact, because we were the same, they really wanted to see me, and they trusted me. That was one of the things when I was going through dental school, was, will that make a difference? I remember Dr. Dillenberg and some of us talking, you know, being someone of that same background and serving those same people, how much of a difference does it make? How do you measure that? So going back and then getting that experience where people just automatically open up to me and say, hey, my tooth hurts here, it hurts here, it hurts here, and when I chew this, when I chew that, and not having to probe them, like, okay, where does it hurt? Okay, why does it hurt? You know, instead they just tell me everything right away, and they trust me. You know, I give them my professional opinion of what's going on, and they trust that what I'm saying is actually for their benefit. Whereas sometimes they don't trust someone who's not of their background. So that was interesting to see that. It was a lot to learn. And, you know, like kind of going again, knowing the community, I know what my people, we like to eat. You know, we like to eat certain foods that maybe you have to grind a little bit more on the food. So, you know, that determines what kind of filling I'm going to put on their back teeth. Am I going to put something that's going to easily break, especially like if I'm going to do a crown? No, I'm going to put something there that they can use to chew that kind of food. So, that's another benefit of getting to know your community. You get to know what the community is eating, what their diet's like, and that helps you determine what's better for their health. And then this is so now like I told you before, I'm in Albuquerque, and I'm at these 3 clinics, and it's a really different experience. Bethel and Ganado, those both were what we call 638 clinics. So they're not with the Indian Health Service, but they're funded by the Indian Health Service. And they are funded through the Public Law 638. So they do get that, but they still, the tribe or the tribal nation of that area, they still manage the hospital. So if that makes sense. Where I'm at now is totally different. We don't get funding from the Indian Health Service because we're a nonprofit. So we have to rely on people that are self-pay, Medicaid. We do have some contracts with the city and the state, so we are able to get some funding from them. And but it makes it really hard because then you can't always get the supplies and the equipment that you need, and you have to be very careful and judicious on some of the materials that you use. But for the overall though, it's for a great purpose. And here at the school, I know some of you are using all the equipment that you need is here. And it's for a good reason, because you have to learn. This is your learning opportunity. But if there's one thing that I would recommend is find ways to be creative. If you don't have that certain type of instrument or that equipment or that material, what else could you use to also do the same thing? Because sometimes the funding is not there, and then you have to figure something else out. So for me though, I have fun with it. I use all my knowledge that I gained over here and I go back to the basics. I go back to fundamentals. What am I trying to do? Root canal. What am I trying to do with the root canal? I'm trying to make it clean as possible and get it all the way down to the apex, and then fill it back up. So what can I use here if I don't have all the stuff that I need? What can I use to at least do that? And those are a lot of things that you might want to start thinking about now. What if I don't have this? What if I don't have that? And just kind of understand that certain equipment and instruments might be of a luxury here, and then once you get out there, you might not have it. So that kind of goes with what I'm saying there with, they're not always ideal, but you gotta just kind of learn about how other ways to approach the problem if you don't have what you need. And then, being adaptable, being appreciative of the stuff that you do have, and being creative. But the good thing now is, I'm using my experiences that I've had at these other places, and I'm trying to make improvements for this organization. And we're slowly getting there, and it's exciting. Look at this school, like I told you what it looked like when I first started. And then with everybody's hard work, look at where it's at now. I think we saw that dental building go up in a matter of weeks. And all of us of the class, we're not sure if we want to go in there. We saw it go up a little bit too fast, and we're not sure if the wall's going to stay. But, it's still there. So, it just shows, how the commitment of everybody of your team, you all working together, makes things happen. So my whole thing is just focus on community. This is a picture of when I was at one of the villages near Barrow, and there were some kids that didn't have any cavities, so they got a pizza party. Just very quickly, find somebody that can be an inspiration and a hero to you. Somebody that relates to who you are. For me, it's Annie Dodge Wanika, because she's a Navajo woman. That's the reason why she's an inspiration to me. And she's very outspoken. She was part of the Navajo Tribal Council, and for those of you that don't know, because we're a sovereign nation, we have our own government. So we have a council, and what they do is they kind of work like the House of Representatives or the Senate, and they make decisions, and they represent all areas of the reservation. So she served as a member of that, and then she also was part of that Health and Welfare Committee. During the time that she had first got involved with this, they started having problems with tuberculosis across the reservation. So instead of, just like, okay, let's see what else we could do, and then call this person, call that person, write a letter, what she did instead was she learned about what is tuberculosis. She went to doctors, and here's a picture of her with the doctors, learning about it, understanding how it's transferred to other people, how to prevent it, what needs to be happening in the household, what do they need to be cleaning so that they don't pass on TB to the next person. And she learned about all of this. Once she finished learning about it, what she did is she jumped in her pickup truck and she drove out to all the different communities, and she went from basically household to household, teaching every community member of that tribe what they need to be doing so they don't pass on TB. That's a huge commitment to the community. And I mean, you think about it nowadays, if you go somewhere, you learn about something, are you committed enough to jump in a vehicle and go household to household? I mean, now, you have to be very careful, but, that just kind of gives you an idea of how much you can do. And you got to think about what are you using to hold yourself back. So just think of ways that work for you. For me, this person is an inspiration to me, and so I always try to think of how can I reach out more. And for yourself, find somebody like that and see how it relates to you and the people that you might be serving later. And then, because of all her hard work, she wasn't trying to gain accolades. Her whole mission was not to say, oh, I'm going to do this because one day I want to get that Presidential Medal of Freedom. She didn't say that. What she did was she wanted to make sure that her people, her community, they're healthy and they are safe. That was her main mission. Her main goal was not to get an award. So whatever you do, are you doing it to get something at the end, or are you doing it because you really want to help the people, and that's where your commitment is? Think about all these great, leaders that we have throughout history. Are they doing what they're doing because they want to be recognized at the end? Sometimes you're not going to be recognized, and you have to be okay with that. It's almost like loaning somebody $20. Are you going to pester them, pay me back, or are you going to give it to them and say, you know what, if I never get it back, it's okay, but I'll just loan it to them? You have to think about things like that. If you're going to help the community, you either do it because you really want to, or it's not going to work out the way that you want if you're trying to get an award from it. So just something to kind of think about. And one of my favorite little quotes that she has is, I'm just a sheep herder with a little more education. And so my father's here, Al Damon, and my brother, Baven. And my dad is actually, he says he's a sheep herder. But we always tease him saying, are you really? We haven't seen your sheep or anything. But so this quote makes me laugh because it makes me say, well, I'm just a sheep herder's daughter with a little more education. So kind of getting, closing it a little bit, integrity. I am huge with integrity. And, I'm just kind of showing things that I've learned as I've gone through my experiences. And I just kind of something for you guys, like food for thought when you go and work with your patients. When you get out, well, once you're in school, you have your instructors to keep you honest. They come and they check your preps. They check your filling. They check your root canal. Did you obturate the way you're supposed to? They keep you honest. And then sometimes it doesn't work out. Okay, we have to do this all over again. But it's a learning experience. Now, when you're out of school, are you going to do that for yourself? Or are you going to say, oh, it's good enough, or no, it'll be all right. We'll see what happens. You have to have some integrity when you leave. Everyone that's here is supporting you. You're here for a reason because you're a leader. And the people that interviewed you saw something in you, and that's why you're here. So when you leave, try to maintain that integrity. If you do your prep, it doesn't turn out right. Okay, this is going to be a little bit inconvenient for the patient, but I don't have time to make it right. Okay, the best thing I can do is probably put a temporary filling in it and tell the patient, I'm sorry, this isn't just working out for me today, and I want to do the best job for you. So I'm going to put this temporary in here, and I'll have you return so I can do a better job. We'll focus on it again. and make sure it gets done right. Now, you as a patient, is that something you want to hear versus, maybe they don't tell you, they just do it, just like that pilot. Oh, yeah, I knew what I was doing. I landed the plane. So just kind of think about that kind of stuff when you're doing your work. If you see something that's not right, don't let the work of trying to do it right, keep you from trying to do it. There's some things that I see it and I'm like, oh, now I'm gonna have to go back, especially with dentures. I see something that's not right and then I might have to do a second try-in. I might have to go all the way start over from even just doing the wax rim. And it's a lot of work, but you know what? I tell myself, this patient is going to be using this for the rest of their life, hopefully. So I need to make it right. And I tell the patient. And a lot of times, if you're really open with the patient and you tell them what you're trying to do, they're more than willing to work with you. In fact, they're going to recommend you to whoever their friend is or their family, because they're going to say, if you go to that person, they're not going to take shortcuts. They're going to make sure they do it right. And a lot of times, that's going to help you get other patients. And it's going to make you a better provider as well, because then you learn from the mistakes. Next time you do it, you learn, I shouldn't have done it this way, so now I'm going to do it this way, and it goes a lot smoother. And that kind of goes with priority are the patients. Find inspiration that matches your values. Like I was saying, find someone that you can look up to, someone that you can emulate. And then be humble. A lot of times, we get out there, and I've done it too. All of us are guilty of it because we're all human. Like, oh yeah, I got this. Class 2 on this tooth, no problem. Or single root canal, or single canal root canal. It's easy. I can do this. And then you get in there and you don't prepare yourself well enough, and then it doesn't turn out the way you want it to. You always have to be aware that you're human. There's always mistakes that can be made. Prepare yourself like there's always going to be something that's going to happen. Because if you do that, then it just makes you a better provider. And take action. Like Annie Dodge Wanika, her thing was, I'll go and do more. So is that enough of what she did, for the people, educating them about TB, trying to prevent it? No, she wants to go and do more things with that, do more with the community. So that's kind of just my main points. I really want to let you know that you guys are having a great education here. And also, for me, just kind of think about the integrity part. Because a lot of times I do see a lot, and sometimes I think people just kind of move too fast. They're trying to get more patients in, they're trying to complete the procedure or whatever they're doing so they can hurry up and move on to the next patient. Sometimes you gotta just, it's gonna happen where you're gonna have to say, I can't do that. And you have to just kind of, take your time. So learn as much as you can. She's my friend, but I also am a mentee. She's telling me they're doing dentures right now, and they have to set teeth. And it's a pain, but you know what? Learn everything you can about it now, because trust me, when you get out, you're going to see something and you're going to say, oh, I wish I would have paid attention more. And I wish I would have taken more time to learn about this. Why does this happen when the teeth come together and it has a denture? Why when I do this does this tooth pop out? You're going to want to remember those things when you're out of school. So whatever field that you're in, PT, PA, dental, the MD, learn everything you can. Try to learn the basics, the fundamentals, because trust me, you're going to use it once you leave. And I'll take any questions right now if you have any. For everyone that didn't hear, she's wondering, someone who's not of the same background of the community, how do we bridge that gap with someone who's not of that same background? I think it just goes back to just taking your time with that community, and really it just involves you sincerely, wanting to learn more about it. If there's some kind of social gathering or an event going on, go to it. And go to it, wanting to be involved, not standing back in the corner somewhere, but, getting involved. if they're cooking or something like that, ask what are they cooking, get in there and start, chopping stuff up or, washing the dishes or whatever it is. If it's just your patients, just talk to them. A lot of times, I think for me, because I deal with people too that are not in my same background. And honestly, like they see me walk in, and a lot of times I deal a little bit with, how long have you been out of school? That kind of question. And so I have to convince them that I am confident in what I'm doing and that I know I'm going to do what I can that's best for them. So what I do is a lot of times I have to sit down and I have to just really talk to them and just be sincere about it and say, what's going on here, let me explain it to you. A lot of times if you just break down what you're trying to do, what your diagnosis is, a lot of times the patients will open up to that and they'll see like, okay, I can talk to this person and they can explain it to me in words that I can understand. So, when one of the examples I love giving is like when I was up in Bethel, they have a lot of salmon there. King salmon, silver salmon, that kind of stuff. When a patient comes in, am I going to say, oh, you're going to need a root canal and, this is going to just, here you have like your nerve here, so we're going to just get that out and put this in. Okay, so you need a root canal. That doesn't really tell them anything. They're like still lost. What does that mean? So the only thing I could think of to kind of make it relatable to them is, okay, think of your tooth like a salmon. Okay, so what do you do when you catch a salmon? You have to gut it. You have to take all the guts out. And then, so your tooth, it has bacteria all throughout the guts of your tooth. So we have to clean that all out. But we can't leave it open. You have to fill it. And then I show them a picture of like their fillings, like on the x-ray. And I'll say, you see, you used to have a cavity here. We took it out and we filled it, and that's why it shows up on the x-ray. So with your root canal, this tooth, once we get the guts out, once that's open, we have to fill it the same way that we did that filling. And that's what a root canal is, and that's what you need in order for that to be okay, unless you just want the whole tooth out. And a lot of times when I did that, they just like, oh, okay, I get it, I understand. No, I don't want you to take my tooth out. I want you to clean it and do a filling in it. So I think if you just try and find ways to explain it to patients in a way that they can understand, and that's going to really involve, like I said, being creative, thinking of something to explain it in layman terms so a patient can understand, they're going to trust you from there on. And I think, you do have to work at it a little bit, but, in the end, it's worth it. Because then, again, you get recommendations. You get the patient leaving saying, oh, that doctor explained it so well, you need to go see that same doctor. Any other questions? Sorry, my voice I kind of came down with something, so.
All right,
No?
so I'm glad you talked about integrity, because I have to make a testimony here that in both small things and large things, I've been able to observe that DezBaa is a person of integrity, and not only that, is willing, as we encourage all of you to be someone with moral outrage. And when she sees wrong happening in the world, she's willing to stand up and take it on. And then for that, I think she really is a George Blue Spruce hero healer. Great guest today. Thank you, DezBaa.